I drive my car up to the lake as if there's someone to awake. I haven't been to bed for days. I live in a twilight haze. I set my heart to the setting sun, and I hope that no one else has done it. And the drinks are never far. Open up the bar. I miss you every single day. I wait until we start going. I hate
And we can begin again.
Alright.
Okay, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Now, it's you obviously pop past because you're buying coffee off us and things.
Yep.
And I noticed the wee logo on your shirt, and I was
Yep.
like, partly, I know
Yep.
that name.
No.
Now, just bring us up to speed. You're one of the co-founders of Partly. Just bring us up to speed about what it's all about and stuff, because I'll probably do a bit of a
Sure.
hash job trying to explain it.
Sure. So I'll take you back right to the start. Myself and some my co-founders at the time, 7-8 years ago, started one business that helped small to medium businesses in New Zealand digitize their inventory and sell online via digital channels. It was an okay business. You know, we grew to working with over 1,000 businesses across New Zealand. Many buyers and significant amount of GMV going through the platform, but eventually we kind of realised that we were going to be limited by New Zealand's borders. It was very difficult to scale that particular business outside of New Zealand, and I guess we had higher ambitions, it didn't end up to be something that we were super passionate about solving, and sort of becoming our life's work, if you look at it that way. So we pivoted the business, or completely shut down that business rather, and started a new business focused on the aspects that were, I guess you could say, succeeding the most from that original business. We had a lot of data. We'd worked with many businesses, seeing what was working, seeing what was not working.
Was it in the same area? Was it kind of in the automobile?
Not at all. So we worked with 1,000 businesses across many different industries, from technology, consumer electronics, fashion,
I see.
home and living, wear, all sorts. But one of the segments was automotive, right? And so when we pivoted the business and started Partly, in some aspects it was shutting down the 99% that wasn't super scalable and wasn't working as well as the 1% that was.
Cool.
And so,
was that a hard decision at the time? Because
absolutely.
you had to say goodbye to 1,000 customers.
That's right. It was a very, very hard decision to make. It took us quite some time to to make that decision and to fully commit. Saying hey, not only to your customers but to your family, your friends, everyone that this business that you've been working on for 3 years, with no salary, no pay at the time as well. You're well invested at that point, and really wanting to make this work and become this thing that you're going to be very successful for.
Because you're thinking about it 24 hours a day. As a business owner, I know that you're just constantly thinking about the future and about the potential and about the vision and the mission and things like that. So that's a big move to turn and do that pivot in such a dramatic way.
It was very difficult to do, but so glad that we did do it in the end, because Partly's obviously been far more successful to date than I think we ever would have achieved with the previous business. And so, in hindsight, it was absolutely the right thing to do, but at the time, it absolutely was not clear, and was taking a big bet. Yeah.
That's cool. I mean, look, in all honesty, that's kind of nice to hear, because we think often that we can romanticize the past quite easily, and success as well, can't we?
Yep.
We sort of think, sweet, it's all good. So 3.5 years ago, you kind of pivoted, was it?
Yep. So 2020, Partly officially is registered on the company register.
Cool.
And, at the time we were basically founders and maybe one or two employees. And just really we didn't really have a product at the very beginning. We had to completely get rid of everything we'd been doing. Remotivate the team. At this point, we're 3 years in and kind of, everyone's kind of getting tired, and shut down. You say like, okay, that 3 years and a half work, we're basically throwing that out and starting from scratch. And so remotivation, you've got to, move really quickly at that point. You've got to always move quickly, but
because you haven't got a product, so you've got nothing to sell. You've got nothing, and you need to reach a point where you can launch something.
No, absolutely. So the challenge at that point was getting something out the door, some kind of MVP, minimal viable product, in front of customers as soon as possible to try and get some traction. So that's what we did. We really hunkered down for 5-6 months, just purely I guess setting the direction of companies, starting putting things out there, iterating on just our website rather than necessarily building the product. So iterating on sort of websites and landing pages, seeing what interested businesses, right? And so I'd be taking demo calls from customers off of a website, but before we had any product launched, right? So just gauging the interest of the industry, of what people needed, what people wanted, and having those early customer conversations. Well, not customers yet, but leads, I suppose. And that really helped, set the direction of what we were building without necessarily having the product there in customers' hands. And so those quick iterations across those calls, both in the direction of the product we were building, but also just iterating on marketing material, really allowed us to, I think, learn the pains of the customer.
Because that's the message. And being a customer-centric business is, super important. And you don't want to focus on the product so much that you forget about the customer. So there was some early days. There were some people that really helped shape that. Was that like your local mechanic, or or like someone from Toyota, or
not Toyota specifically, but we did speak to people from large vehicle manufacturers and OEMs. We spoke to mechanics, dealerships, online parts suppliers, retailers, everyone throughout the industry. Because the problem that we're looking at solving really, or the problem that we'd seen our customers experiencing was around this data flow, I guess you could think of it as. So from the fitter's perspective, or from the mechanic or the person who's actually putting the part in the car, there's some huge challenges today that people experience. One is simply the process for buying a part, depending as to whether it's a genuine new part versus an aftermarket part versus a used part, can be very different and involving multiple different systems and steps. There's issues around actually finding the correct part. So there's huge amounts of time that goes into that, phone calls, conversations with parts interpreters on the other end to try and, ultimately decide whether it's part A or B. And in the end, many a time, you can't actually really know. And so it's quite common in the industry to just send the 2 or 3 parts. The mechanic fits the one that is correct and sends 2 back.
That's really interesting. So, and partly is all about connecting the people that need the parts with the parts themselves. So it's software, essentially it's software as a service, isn't it? It's providing a service.
Via software. No, that's absolutely right. I mean, our mission is to connect the world's parts. We do that by providing digital cataloging infrastructure to many different companies throughout the supply chain that ultimately help the buyer or the fitter find the right part. So our customers are generally larger businesses in the automotive space, and so retailers,
what do you mean?
manufacturers.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Sometimes your dealerships or e-commerce sellers as well, or basically anyone who is involved in that part supply chain, and their customers are the mechanics or the fitters or the
right.
buyers of those parts.
And so who pays? Who pays for it? Is it the guys? Is it everyone?
It is. I mean, generally it's the suppliers of the parts, so the sellers of the actual part. But we have to be very careful in not. And we still have to design around the ultimate end user, right? And so that's really important to us, that we have sort of a value in the business called buyer or fitter obsession, and that's important because although they're not the one necessarily paying us, they're the one who we're ultimately designing and exist to serve. And so we have to be very intentional around.
Well, I mean, I suppose there's a lot of industries, for example, X, or social media companies where the user, they refer to them, the user as the product kind of thing, and they're being sold to by, the advertising pays for the platform, I guess, but the user is probably what's most important.
That's right.
That's cool. I've been thinking ever since, originally when I wanted to do this podcast, my car got stolen, and I had to go through all that rigmarole, and they replaced the entire engine and all sorts of things, which was cool.
Wow, yeah.
Ended up with an engine with about 100,000 k's less than what the previous engine had done. And I've been thinking about cars and the automobile industry and how complex it is, and all of those parts. And I can't think of anything else potentially that rivals it.
No, there isn't a whole lot of industries that rival it.
I was making Lego last night with my son, and I was kind of thinking there's a lot of parts to Lego, but not as much.
No, well, in describing this problem, I like to talk about Jeff Bezos, right? When he started Amazon, he started with books. And the reason he started with books is because of the number of unique SKUs in the world. It's impossible for any physical store to actually stock every book in the world, right? And so it makes sense to have an online platform where to sell them. Parts, there's an order of magnitude more unique parts, at least in the world, than there are unique books in the world. Every vehicle has between 25 to 35,000 parts in it. Those parts vary depending on where the vehicle is sold. So a Corolla in Japan and a Corolla for New Zealand New versus the US and Europe is different. There's a huge aftermarket industry that makes replacement copies essentially of the original parts. There's trillions and trillions of parts out there in the world.
And I read on the website, the Partly website, that I'm trying to avoid saying the word part, but a portion of the work and stuff and the parts that you'll be sourcing is second hand, and those bits as well. So they are, which is a really cool kind of sustainable part of the business.
Absolutely. So reusing parts is a it's recycling. It's reusing the same thing over and over. So it's better than recycling. It's literally reusing a part. So it's the most sustainable sort of
that's right.
method here. At the moment, it's just incredibly difficult to buy them. Is the problem. So, when you buy a used part today, basically it has to involve a conversation over the phone. In order to identify the correct one, unless you're quite, well trained and understand parts very well. And so, a big part of Partly's mission is to sort of, I guess, increase the usage or
the accessibility.
The accessibility, and ultimately, obviously, it's driving us towards a more sustainable future.
No, I love that idea. And so 3.5 years ago, you kind of nailed down a prototype or a sort of a product that you were able to launch.
Yep.
And what happened? Was it?
Well, it was a very iterative process.
Yeah.
Starting with something that was very, very basic, but solved one very small problem. But from day one, designing for a very ambitious outcome, I suppose. And so, it starts with a very narrow problem that you're solving. You find, one business that has that problem, and you charge a small amount of money for them to use it, and
you're kind of getting your foot in the door.
Slowly getting your foot in the door. Now, the product today and the direction today is wildly different to what it was on day one, but that ultimate mission is still the same.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. That's nice. I mean, the messaging is obviously staying the same, and you can look back and feel confident that you made the right decision. And what's happened along the way? You've gathered different people. You've kind of there was what do they call it? Was there crowdsourcing, or how did you go about
growing, raising
capital and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So, I guess in that first year of Partly's journey, we were fortunate that after that period of initial sort of planning and strategizing and building product, and then jumping on calls with all of these demos that we were able to sort of generate prior to really having a product ready to launch. But we did get a lot of people coming in via that website and taking these demo calls, and it was quite impressive. In the previous business, we had to fight for every customer. We had to go out there and really try and convince people to use our product. Whereas this was quite the opposite. We'd really struck a pain point for people, to the point that they were finding this random site from a New Zealand company and clicking a book a demo button, right, and then actually taking the call. And so that was quite, at that point we sort of felt, okay, we're really onto something big here, with the amount of people that were coming in, and then the companies got larger. We were able to sort of start working with some well-known names in the industry relatively early, and that was enough to convince a VC, a venture capitalist, to invest, I think, $1.7 million into the business at that time, which allowed us to, I guess, grow out an initial small team, really actually build out a better functioning product to get in the hands of more people, to iterate and grow and really prove out the concept.
What's it like pitching to someone for $1.7 million? It takes a lot of practice. It takes a lot of practice. You don't have a lot of practice, do you? Or do you? Because Or was he number 12 or something?
In this particular case, it was a very quick sort of capital raise, but it's not the normal story. I mean, the normal story is that you will be pitching 50 to 100 times before you successfully sort of close a round. But it takes a lot of practice. You got to really understand that it's a highly leveraged time in your business, and it's worth your full attention, and it's a full-time job for that period. Many founders and entrepreneurs go out there and treat it as a side project or a sort of a secondary priority while they go out to raise capital, and are unsuccessful because of it. You've really got to treat it with the respect that it deserves.
True.
So that was really the first round. We've since raised subsequent rounds of 3 million and then 35 million. So in total over $40 million of New Zealand.
Oh, Milton, you were right.
Of course, capital over the 3.5 year period. Each time it's a big process.
A lot of kind of responsibility, and I'm getting sweaty palms just thinking about it. Cool. And tell me, how did you? I've looked at the sort of the team.
Yep.
And you're the chief operating officer. You've got Levi as the CEO, and then was it Tony or yeah, Tony and Harry and stuff like that.
Yep.
Tony's got a past in working for Repco, Amazon, and eBay, all in the motor parts kind of industry.
Yep.
Already.
Correct. Yep. So Tony's background is incredibly important and helpful to the business. So he, started out his career at Repco, starting out right at the bottom.
So presumably that's an international company. It's not just. Because sometimes I never know, when I walk into a shop, I don't know if it's just national or international.
Well, it's now owned by an international company,
right.
But I think Repco predominantly operates in New Zealand, Australia.
Oh, yeah.
So he started, and sort of moved up through the company, and then ended up eventually running eBay's automotive motors business and then across to Amazon as well. And so
because Repco is probably like the old school, like taking it back to the books, it's like the old school bookshop on the corner, right?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an old, well-known, sort of.
They have the parts out the back.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, if you ask any New Zealander, at least, where do you go to buy parts? It's Repco or Supercheap, right? Yeah. No, absolutely.
And then Levi had Tony came on. He had all of that wealth of experience in that particular thing. Was he mates beforehand, or was that just you headhunted him, or?
Well, that's a bit of a funny story actually as to how that connection came about, and it just goes to show, I think, how these little actions that you take that you think, it's not worth doing, but then you kind of think, we'll give it a shot. It's worth doing the giving it a shot piece, because it really started out right at the very start of the business, where I think we'd done some kind of piece of media or something, and because Tony's so involved in the industry and keeps his thumb on the pulse very closely at the time, he was running Australia's Amazon's business.
Yeah.
And he looked at our LinkedIn company profile. And on LinkedIn you can see when someone views it, and it tells you their names. And at that time, no one was viewing our. We'd just only just had something very small out there, and so basically we say, there's this top Amazon executive looking at our our LinkedIn profile page. Most people would just think, oh wow, and then move on. But no, credit to my co-founder Levi. He reached out and said, hey, I noticed you were looking at our LinkedIn page, got on a call, started building that relationship, and within 18 months he was a co-founder in the business.
Cool. That's awesome. So tell us about Levi. Levi's got a little bit of intuition there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So Levi is a very impressive founder. I've been fortunate to know Levi since childhood. We were both homeschooled. And sort of part of that same homeschooling community, I guess. And I used to go to his house on Wednesdays, and we'd build hay huts and drive go-karts around and things like this. And so, we've known each other since kids, and he's always had sort of that knack for fixing things and solving problems, and very ambitious, passionate person. So, during university, and that we'd ended up sort of flashing together, or more specifically, I'd renovated the garage from my mate's flat, so I was living in the garage, and then Levi had built a caravan from scratch, like built the entire caravan, and he parked the caravan up the drive. And so we had this really weird sort of living situation with Levi and the caravan. I was in the garage, and then my other mate in the actual house. And that's where the company lived for the first year, was just every day we would fold up the bed in the caravan and walk in a desk, And then, I would sit in this dark sort of caravan room in the desk and at the table coding away or typing away.
That's remarkable. Not many people would build themselves a caravan. There's a guy up the road from me that's built himself a car. Which took him years. And I didn't even know you could build yourself a car. And I've been thinking, wouldn't it be cool if the partly business, I thought you could do this as a marketing thing, is just build a car from parts, like from scratch, and do it as almost not like a team building exercise, but just do it over a number of years.
Yes, yeah.
And record the whole thing.
Yeah.
And then, every employee could, one day a week, they could add a part.
Yeah, that was very similar. We've had a similar idea. The intention is to potentially, because we just expanded the office, to have we were kind of thinking like an old sort of, run down car that we could sort of soup up a bit, and as part of employee orientation they have to identify a part, go out and buy it and then fit it. So something like that is
I
great
think
idea.
that would be fantastic. That would be cool. But you just need to make sure you get the car back out again, because you'd have to pull it apart and then build it back up on the outside.
It is a great idea. Anything that brings the company closer to the fitter or closer to the end user of the product is
totally. So so you've built, how many people have you got employed now?
So we're maybe 75, 80 staff globally. Around about maybe half of that is in Christchurch. We have people spread across New Zealand and Dunedin, Wellington, an office in Auckland, an office in London, a fair amount of people across a few countries in Asia, Philippines, India, Japan, a bunch of people in Australia.
Now, why is that? Why have you sort of spread yourself comparatively thinly around the place?
Yeah, I mean, a few reasons. So in terms of the markets we sell in today, Europe and Australia are probably our biggest markets. And so from that perspective, you want to have people in market. So most of the people in those areas are from our go-to-market teams. And then and at other times, it's simply where the talent is. And so... Christchurch is great, and we want to hire as much as possible here. But for a growing company like ours, sometimes you can't necessarily always get the talent directly. And so we've opened up an Auckland office to capture some of the talent that we can find there, and then in other places around the world, sometimes it's necessary to do so as well. But we're an office first company, so we generally want people to move to one of our office locations. We help them to do that. But then other there's always
parameters which lie outside of that. I kind of get that. So the people in those working are sort of more spread out. What are their roles? So they're more customer focused.
Generally more customer focused. In market, particularly for our industry, it's the face to face is quite important still. And so meeting people face to face.
Cool.
But also we have in the Philippines we have quite a significant team there now. A lot of them are ex-mechanics. And so they're providing insight and
that's right. With every person that you bring on, especially from different countries and cultures and things like that, I can imagine the what do they call that thing with AI where it just starts learning, sort of just accumulating knowledge. Like the business will be accumulating knowledge with each new person that comes on, which will be able to contribute.
I mean, you're right, but I mean, it's extremely difficult to do it in this short period of time, to go from 5 people to 15 people a year later to 30, and now to double that again, over double it again, to go to 70, 80. The biggest challenge is in bringing all of those people up to speed, and sharing the context. And 'cause, today we have people managing large teams, but they've only been in the business for 6 months, and so it's a big challenge. Yeah.
But you can, presumably they have, a past and they've got experience and things like that. They're not just coming straight off.
I mean, absolutely.
Yeah.
However, we build a complicated product in a complicated industry. There's not many people who have worked in automotive parts, technology, data.
So it's a fresh product in a fresh kind of space, and it's a fresh team of people.
Yep.
And really,
that's right. Yeah, and so transferring that knowledge, someone who hasn't come out of the automotive parts industry, most of our engineering team has come out of the tech or engineering industry.
Yeah,
and so you have to teach the parts industry. And that's not easy to do. Yeah.
One curious thing I saw, Nathan, is on your platform. It's about you've got a standardizing the naming conventions.
Yep.
What's that all about? So people call things different parts, different around the world?
Right, so very basic level, hood versus bonnet, right?
Oh, right. Yep.
In the US, they refer to the part that as a hood. We call it a bonnet. For a business who sells parts from multiple suppliers around the world, you can't have some of the bonnets from your Australasian suppliers in one part of the website and hoods from your.
I'm just imagining suppliers. Bonnets that you put on your head, like old ladies or something,
But that's at a really basic level. You think, okay, well, what do you call the part that attaches the front bumper cover to your reinforcement bar?
Yeah, which doesn't.
And if you were to Google the part number on Google, it's going to give you, 20 different names for it.
Yes.
Is it a bumper cover retaining bracket? Is it a...
So that's part of the nightmare landscape that you're seeking to rectify.
Absolutely. And so if you're trying to... if you're thinking of the fitter, right? You're thinking of the person who's actually buying the part or putting it on the vehicle at the end of the day. They need to be able to compare across industries, across parts, using that same convention, and the part types need to be consistent, but also, all of the attributes, all of the vehicle information, all of that. There's just hundreds of ways of describing every vehicle across the world and every part across the world, and you've got to be
So there's no Dewey Decimal System as such.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It surprised me when I heard that. But it makes sense. The world's such a massively complicated place.
That's right, yeah. There's many different factors that come into play there. Just language comes into play there. The actual vehicles are often different. Like, you'll get OEMs, your vehicle manufacturers will call the same car different things in different markets, right? Because they'll market it, just sells better under this name in this country.
Yeah.
But if they're the same, that's another case of you've got to try and be able to understand that they're the same, or the opposite happens. They're called exactly the same thing in different markets, but the parts could be extremely different depending on the the safety regulations of each country or the terrain that the vehicles are operating on. And so,
well, why would a manufacturer sell a similar product under a different name? What's that all about? How do they work that out?
I think that the naming stuff, I believe it mostly comes down to marketing. Maybe sometimes it's down to like just what already exists in that country. Maybe a particular name in New Zealand has already been used for something else, and so when the consumers think of that name, they think of a different product. So they might have to change the name for a country.
Because internally, those businesses must have their own codes and things. But is it so you're unable to kind of use those, or they are part of it but not guaranteed?
They're part of it. There's your genuine new parts. Like obviously Toyota puts out a part number, unique part number for every single part that they make, right?
Yeah.
It gets complicated when someone else in the industry, there's 100 other manufacturers, aftermarket manufacturers making replacements for that.
Right, I see.
And they each have a unique code for it as well.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, you have the used parts one, and they might not necessarily.
Oh, I'm just
They
getting
just wouldn't even know.
just getting an insight into
Yeah.
how freaking complicated this stuff is.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah. And so you've got to be able to know that original Toyota part is the same as these other 100 parts, and then you've got to be able to identify that part from when you dismantle it from a used part perspective as well.
Yeah, that's intense. I can imagine the used parts especially, because that would be happening on a lot kind of smaller scale. Like a car breaks down, it stays within the city where it gets kind of stripped or whatever. It's not like there's large international corporate businesses responsible for second-hand car parts, is it? Or
well,
it's
you'd
generally
probably be
little
surprised.
local places? Or?
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of the time it is on a smaller scale and more local places, but there are very large businesses that operate in this space as well.
Oh, there are.
Very
Yeah.
large networks, maybe particularly across in the US and sometimes across Europe as well. We have very large, multi-billion-dollar businesses that own many different used parts yards, and so it's a large industry. Like the parts industry, you've got over $1 trillion spent on parts every year. It's just huge. $1 trillion.
Yeah.
1,000 billion.
Yeah, I know.
Mate, that's an incomprehensible number.
Yeah.
And you're the chief operating officer.
Yeah.
What does your day look like? Any given day? Or is it...
well, I mean, it's changed a lot over the years. At the start of the business, a COO is just basically the title that you give to the founder who's not the CEO and not an engineer. And so basically it means that I did, all of the finance, I did all of the legal, I did a lot of the sales at the beginning, I did the customer success at the beginning, I did all of our, government relationships, I did all of the people stuff at the beginning, all of that sort of thing. And then slowly as the business has matured, we now have a dedicated customer success team, so
Yes.
I don't need to do that anymore. We have a dedicated finance team. We have a dedicated people team.
That must be a huge relief, I would imagine.
Have a sales team, and so absolutely, like handing off each of these, from doing that and having, I guess, people who are much better at you do it has been great. And so slowly, all of those different hats that I used to wear have been given off throughout the years until now. Basically, it's more about I guess being a bit more strategic operationally as opposed to necessarily being as hands on the tool. So it's, I mean, in a nutshell, it's understanding the direction and strategy of the business as set by the CEO, and then helping to align, the entire different operation around that. So building in the structures, building in the communication frameworks, the cadence for meetings, all of those sorts of things. But at the same time, I do still stay fairly involved in a number of the more, I guess, business-facing teams and the more operational teams, I suppose. But ultimately, also, I still try to, stay on the front lines as much as possible and have my hands on the tools and talk to customers and really understand that full business context.
Yeah, true. It must feel. When you were in that zone, because look, to be honest, a lot of startups remain startups and they don't get off the ground in the way that Partly has. So is it kind of? Do you sometimes pinch yourself and think, how did I do all of that stuff back then? You guys, it sounds like you've got like a really tight vision and stuff. And
I mean, you never feel like your work's complete. I mean, you're constantly still, just focused on fighting the biggest fire. Yeah. And so in some ways it doesn't feel a whole lot different now as it did, 3 years ago. It's just that the stakes are a lot higher. But at least you have a lot more people around, working towards that same goal. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, the many startups still remain startups. I don't know officially when a company graduates
just made that
from being a startup to not being a startup.
Yeah.
But there are times where you've got to sort of sit back and kind of reflect and look at how far you've come and be proud of what you've achieved. But for the most part, you feel you're just focused on the biggest fire. A lot of the time.
Yeah.
What sort of fires are you facing at this stage?
Yeah, so I mean, one of them is definitely what I alluded to before around context and like just trying to share this very complicated industry across these. Again, going back to the fact that we've, doubled in size over the past 12 months, right? Going from 40 to close to 80 people. You've got 40 people who've been in the business for less than 12 months.
Yeah.
Coming in to understand a very nuanced, complex problem that's, sort of developed over the history of cars, really, all throughout these different stages. And so transferring that context, and that context is very different from the perspective of an engineer to a salesperson, right? And they kind of equally need to understand from different sort of angles how the product works together, how it kind of solves different problems. So that's definitely been a focus recently, and I suspect will continue to be a focus. But also like just the new markets that we're entering into. So, when we enter into a new market, every market is quite unique and nuanced depending on the vehicles that are on the road, depending on the purchasing behaviour, of people in there, and how that supply chain operates can be very, very different between different countries. And so that's always a challenge, thinking about these new markets. Hiring people, trying to find the right people to fill roles, trying to decide what the next role really needs to be. Yeah. Considering that you have limited resources and you really want to be most efficient in the way that you're scaling and treat it with the respect.
So you're just on the front line all the time and trying to operate at the optimum levels.
That's right. Yeah. Being on the front line is absolutely the case. Yeah. You want to be talking to, the potential new employees. You want to be talking to the customers. You want to be talking to, understanding all of that context right at the forefront. Yeah.
Wow. Who do you take inspiration from? Like, yeah.
I mean, as a business, I think, many people within the technology sector or startup sort of tech sector, we follow fairly closely. I think there's been some great inspirational companies that we look up to. The likes of Stripe, I think, has been very impressive, and other sort of, I guess, more heavily technical sort of infrastructure products, digital infrastructure, I guess, are what we sort of study a lot of. Companies that have quite significant network effects are also very interesting to us. But I think one part is my co-founder Levi was one of the early employees at Rocket Lab, and so I think that Rocket Lab culture has sort of flowed on through into partly, and I guess Peter Beck's probably someone that we definitely look up to. And
that's interesting because you can't underestimate any kind of area, could you? Because I mean, having a blind spot in that one particular area might be the downfall or something like that. It might just be,
That's right. I mean, you've got
the greatest idea isn't going to overcome some of those obstacles.
No. Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, everything's in the execution. The idea is close to worthless on its own.
Yeah, totally right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Damn right.
No, everything's in the execution. I mean, the hardest part is often for me. I'm a very operational sort of guy, and so my challenge is actually just deciding now, it's less my job, more the CEO, CSO's job. But you've got all of these 80 people, running in a certain direction, right? And so you've just got to really be super confident that you pointed them in the right direction. And that's a really hard thing for me, because my personality is I just want to run harder and faster than everyone else, right? And sometimes I'm so focused on running harder and faster than everyone that I forget to sort of look up and actually figure out whether I'm still on the same track.
I think that's a good leadership quality, though, I'd say.
Yeah, you've just got to be self-aware enough to understand where your strengths are and where they're not.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
The work culture.
Yes.
Man, it seems awesome. I was just reading through some of the cultural points on the website. Yeah. And to have that foundation to help steer the crew and steer people's personalities.
Yeah, I think... we've been very intentional about the culture of the business. I think, there's a few principles that you have to, I guess, consider or be aware of it. I think the first is you've got to understand that not everyone is going to be right for partly, and kind of go into that mindset is that you're doing something really hard or something that requires a unique skill set or mindset. And some people it's not going to be suited for them, and that's okay. And so that's one, I think, challenge, is that when you're building a culture, you've got to actually decide what people you want and what you don't, and you're not trying to just put out these ideas that are acceptable to everybody, because not everybody is. You're trying to please everyone. And so we've designed pretty unique, ambitious sort of values that are, I think, fairly well embraced throughout the organisation. Everyone I think is quite involved, and we have just really basic sort of stupid sort of thing that we have is we use Slack for our internal communications, right? And so you can react to messages, and we have these little value, company value reacts, which are very commonly used throughout the organisation. When someone displays a certain value, you react like that. We incorporate our company values very, very deeply into our interview process, and so we test against those values, and it's really made clear, I think, to everyone who's looking to join the business that this is the culture of the company, and exactly this is what it's like. And some people love it.
With any relationship, because it's a relationship essentially when you break it down that you've got with your employees and with each other. Like any relationship requires that type of thing. You need to know what you're getting yourself into, and you need that transparency and trust and respect, and otherwise, it can either be a blessing and an amazing thing, or it can just be a nightmare.
Absolutely. So starting the relationship off with a mutual understanding of what we're all about is really important.
Cool, man.
Well, I know that some industries, they claim to have these values and so forth. Yeah. Even just having productive meetings rather than just being busy for being the sake of being busy. But to police that and make it happen is awesome. And it's just got to make everybody feel good in the company. Yeah. That we're actually doing something. We're not just fluff.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, your values, it has to be a trade-off, right? You have to, for it to make sense, like you can't, I don't like, you don't want to have values that are like, I don't know, just something like respect. Yeah. It's like, obviously, like no one disagrees with that. Like it's just like, how is that supposed to help you make decisions? The classic Facebook value, in the early days was move fast and break things, because it's a great value because it's an obvious trade-off, right? Like you're optimizing for something and not for something else, and so it really helps as part of the decision framework. Now, eventually they changed that value, right, to something like move fast and break things with stable infrastructure, or move fast with stable infrastructure.
But you got to start off with move fast and break things in order to get the whole thing going.
That's exactly right. I mean, there might be some companies where you can't. I don't know, something like some kind of drug development company. It's probably not an appropriate value.
I was thinking something medically as well.
But the point is that it's at one end of the spectrum, and it's very clear to everyone in the organisation which side of the spectrum you're optimising for. Yeah,
and also it's like implicit in move fast and break things. You're still listening to your instincts, your intuition. You're working with these other internal factors.
And failure is kind of there's a purpose to it. It has another side to it, which it has a what's it called? I'm not going to think of the word, but it has a purpose. It has a function. Yeah. So no, that's cool. I'm pretty good at failure.
Hey,
you've got to be really comfortable with failure and trying things.
That was another thing in the value system. Your staff, they can call each other out and challenge each other.
Look, there's
respect, but you need to be able to be called out and
that's right. I think,
challenged and all that stuff.
Yeah,
but
cultural.
You've got to be grown up.
Best idea wins, and open to debating those ideas. And
a lukewarm bureaucracy is just...
we all know where that goes.
I'm not going to talk about government, but anyway.
I think I think there's even a verse in the Bible about lukewarm or something, isn't there?
Yeah, totally. It's just...
Yes, some of these things are eternal for a good reason.
That's right. Yeah, that's cool. Look, we're really looking forward to seeing how Partly grows further, and it's astounding how far you've come.
Still at the beginning.
Yeah, I know. It's amazing. Yeah.
What's an example, Nathan, of a business who might take up your platform, how they're working before they took up your platform and after?
Yeah, so today in the world of automotive catalogue data is a lot of manual processes, so there's a lot of copy and pasting.
Yeah, I think you see it just on the phone. It's simply...
On the phone.
Yeah.
So from the seller's perspective, right, you're selling Pilgrim parts, and you're selling from these certain 100 suppliers that, are based in New Zealand, Australia, Taiwan, China, maybe you've got some US brands there or whatever. They're all sending you information in different ways. Some are on CSV spreadsheets, some are on PDFs, some aren't sending you really anything at all. And you, as Pilgrim Parts, right, you've got to
make sense of all of this.
You've got to make sense of all of this. 100 different suppliers, each sending you, 50,000 parts, right? So you're selling let's say, 300,000 unique SKUs. Each of the data sources are in different formats, describing parts in different ways, providing you different levels of information, different levels of quality of information, and
chaos,
right? And so today, the way that you solve it is you hire 10 people to kind of try and work this data and kind of try and merge it and figure it out and kind of become experts in it. And the result is generally, not a great experience for the buyer, right? And at the end of all of that, you still have to answer the phone for your buyers, just checking, hey, is this really going to fit my car? And then you're on the phone with them and you're saying, okay, can you just double check that your wing mirror has 9 wires and not 7, or can you just confirm that the spare wheel is fitted in the boot of the vehicle and not on the back? You're asking all of these qualifying questions, which takes up obviously your valuable time. It is a reason for a buyer not to actually purchase the part. And so solving all of that, that's kind of just one of the use cases.
And your business is just all about the buyer. It's your number one focus.
Absolutely. We're designing everything around the end user. They're not the one necessarily paying us money, but it's the person that both us and our customers care the most about.
Yeah. No, that's phenomenal. That's so cool. And so, and like you say, that solves that problem to a certain degree.
Yeah.
So going back to Milton's question, so what are they... They've just got an interface, like a dashboard or something, and they can type in and do searches on anything. And there's a whole load of variables.
Yeah. So it's up to our customers kind of as to how they want to necessarily, implement a lot of our technology. We kind of, provide that standard and that structure and all the tools for managing all of that information, and then they take all of that nice data and then implement it in various ways as to show their customers, whether that includes things like registration lookups and want to find the right part based off of that, or correctly identifying their vehicle, or even they might want to enrich their data. They don't necessarily know all of the information about this part. They might not know like the dimensions of it, or the schematics, or the fitment information and things like that. And often our platform sort of helps them to.
So you're making it as easy as possible for them, and with the optimized levels of data, information, and efficiency, right. And just ease of making it happen.
Yeah, all of the tools. We just process a huge amount of data. There's machine learning, AI going on in the background to really help with this process. It's a problem well known in the industry across many different years, many years. It just hasn't really been solvable until recent developments.
No, it's one of those industries.
It's an old industry, isn't it?
That's
comparatively,
right. Where people have just thought, it's always been this way.
That's exactly right.
So would there be old classic car parts on Partly? Like there's old, Model T Ford or something like that?
Not quite that old, but old parts. Those... Back in those days, obviously, there was no digitalisation, and so there's very little information a lot of the time around the old parts, and those are even more complicated in that generally buying those parts involves browsing multiple forums, to actually figure out. So it's an incredibly painful process to go through, and so absolutely digitising is far back. Most of the parts that are transacted today are not in that space, and so to some degree we've got to focus on where the most transactions are happening.
That's right, true.
That would be bad, Dave, just to focus on
that's a failure. I was just
but the platform supports it. The platform supports it.
Yeah. Is there any part of cars that you don't like? Do you stay away from tyres?
We do stay away from tyres.
Oh.
Tyres. They're just a unique industry that operates on its own, completely separate from everything else. There's different ways of breaking down the parts industry. We do better at some versus others. You've got your mechanical repair, you've got your collision repair, you've got your service and maintenance, you've got your performance industry. All of these operate quite differently and quite differently across different markets as well. And so there's sweet spots for us in other areas that we're still building out. But industries like tyres, generally like lubricants and stuff, we don't do a whole lot of today. But a lot of the
those would they be consumables considered to be?
Yeah, they would be. Lubricants very commoditizable. They're consumables, and just the entire supply chain in the business operating is quite separate too.
It's all consumables at some level, I suppose.
What's
this? You appeared on the Forbes 30. What's that called?
30 under 30.
30 under 30.
Yeah.
You and
Levi,
both you and
myself.
And Levi. Yep.
Yeah, it's not. It feels nice to kind of, I guess, be recognised on a list like that. But it's, I don't know. As a Kiwi, you kind of don't.
Did you hang it on the caravan wall?
No. Well, this was only recently. At the caravan days, we weren't recognised for anything. But no, it's nice, all of these different recognitions, and it goes back to, as I was saying before, you do have to step back sometimes and kind of reflect and
celebrate.
It is important.
Cool, man. Hey, thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for the coffee. And
no worries. Hey, it's breakfast time now, so
I love the cafe. I've praised you many a times before, and I have my own internal list at work actually of all the cafes I visit in Christchurch and Pilgrim.
Crazy.
I rank them all. And Pilgrim's top for the coffee. Yep. So
sweet, nice one. Top 30 under 30.
There you go.
Over 30. Anyway, thanks Nathan for coming in.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers. Bye.